Last time we did our Cornerstone rankings, we gave you a brand new player category system, very unique, first time thing we've done. We introduced it and we defined Cornerstones differently than what you've seen, but now we have 2026 rookies to add to these rankings. And so what we're gonna do today, we're gonna rank our Cornerstone assets according to our player category system that we created. You're gonna see our foundational rankings as well. Just for funsies, we'll throw up the upside premier rankings so you can see the rookies that fell in that as well. But where are these rookies in our rankings, in our player categories, falling into the Dynasty market? That's what we're looking at today. Do us a huge favor, drop a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed as well if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Let's start with our cornerstones. And again, I want to keep referencing our player categories here because we created this system. We worked on it for about an entire year, creating this system to define different types of assets in Dynasty Fantasy Football, something that was unique, had never been done before. We pulled it out, and I think it's been helpful. People have enjoyed it, and we've got the player categories listed over on the site for people as well. So that way they can kind of reference as they're making moves what type of player you're actually buying here. So we're looking at cornerstones. The definition of a cornerstone: a highly insulated asset with proven elite production. The ceiling has already been realized, but there's still room to grow due to their elite nature as a player and a fantasy asset. It's unlikely for their Dynasty value to dip after they have a bad season, okay? This is the best of the best, right? And so cornerstones, a lot of times, again, on Cornerstone videos, and this is pretty much our fault, you know, you look at any Cornerstone video throughout the industry, Cornerstone videos are actually started by Mason Dodd, Mr. Flock Fantasy himself. He was the first person we ever saw do a Cornerstone video. Pretty much Cornerstone videos for all time just ranked the top 25 to 50 players in Dynasty.
Under 25.
Under 25, which...
And they're
just Dynasty rankings.
More than half those guys aren't actual Cornerstone assets.
So again, coming up with the actual category system helps us kind of look at these guys in a different light. But starting with the S tier of our Cornerstones, if you have watched any of our startup drafts or participated in a domain league or really even a non-domain league, these are typically the top 7 guys that go off of the boards in Dynasty startup drafts. You have Josh Allen, and I'm gonna put Drake May in here as well. And actually, I'm going to move Lamar Jackson down a tier. I think that at this point, he is down a tier.
Yeah, he can be.
Allen and May are the 2 quarterbacks we would put in this tier. Allen and May in domain leagues, for example, typically go anywhere from 5 to 7. You see all these wide receivers and all these running backs. And from a team build perspective and from a market perspective in a domain league where you can't move off of a quarterback a lot, very easy at all, I understand this. But it's worth noting that even in 4-point leagues, these guys are S-tier selections here. They are the best of the best from the quarterback position. Josh Allen obviously does Josh Allen things, right? He's been a top 5 quarterback for the past, I don't even know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Like, he was the quarterback 1 again last year, and he's played all 17 games each of the last 5 years. Like, you cannot beat that at the quarterback position. He is head and shoulders above everybody else, or at least he was until Drake May stepped on the field. And Drake May, in his first full season as a starter, he had 359 points this year. He was only 15 points behind Josh Allen on the year. And people want to comp this to the Jaden Daniels thing. Jaden Daniels would have been in the S tier of these Cornerstone rankings last year. The big difference here is that with Jaden Daniels was playing very well for a rookie. It was the rushing upside as a rookie that was really propelling him here. It wasn't necessarily his play on the field in the NFL. It was good. They made the playoffs, and he was a good quarterback. But Drake May was one vote short of winning MVP. You weren't talking about that with Jaden Daniels last year. And so people want to say, well, I'm kind of scared to invest in May because I think the same thing is going to happen as Jaden Daniels did. But from a real-life NFL quarterback perspective, he brings that rushing upside that you saw with somebody like Jaden Daniels. Last year, he had 103 rushing attempts for 450 yards. He brings a bunch of rushing upside. And just for reference here, Jaden Daniels had 891 yards his rookie year. So he had a lot more of that rushing upside. However, when you're talking about from a passing perspective, Jaden Daniels in his rookie year had 3,500 passing yards and 25 touchdowns. Drake May this year had 4,400 passing yards and 31 touchdowns. It's a pretty big difference. So Drake May, we're betting. I'm very comfortable taking Drake May at the top of startups this year. I do not think he's going to get the Jaden Daniels treatment. So I just wanted to kind of give some reasoning as to why he's a safe investment in Dynasty and belongs up there with Josh Allen. Again, first full year as a starter, and he's the quarterback too, and he's trying to win MVP. Like, that's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, Daniels only got the Daniels treatment because he got hurt. Like, we kind of just got unlucky there.
Yep, and that's 100% true. And Daniels could very well find himself in the S tier again next year. But looking at the other skill position guys in this tier, you have the wide receivers, the 3 wide receivers that everybody kind of takes above everybody else. Jamar Chase, elite upside. Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's got to stay healthy, and it's a big question mark with him. But all of these guys have question marks to some extent, right? With Chase, it's he and Burrow both need to stay healthy at the same time. With JSN, it's JSN from an efficiency standpoint and from a touchdown standpoint last year. It's going to be very hard for him to replicate what he did. It just is. He was the wide receiver 2 overall last year. He had 10 touchdowns. He had 17, almost dang near 1,800 yards. And his efficiency was literally otherworldly. I think it's highly unlikely that he's that efficient again this year. But it doesn't mean he's not an S-tier Cornerstone asset. And it doesn't mean he's going to lose value or anything. And even if he gets his points in a different manner, he's still going to score a crap ton of points. And so that's JSN, you could argue, is very safe at the top of this tier. And then Puka Nacua, obviously the question is the off-the-field stuff. Is he crazy, and is he going to keep doing crazy stuff? Like, that is... I mean, what are you going to say about it? You're his lawyer and spokesperson and fan club member and Pookie. Like, what do you... Like, no comment? Decline to comment?
Decline to comment.
Okay, so there you go. See, they decline to comment. But Puka,
I still
again...
have his jersey right behind me. So.
Yeah.
That's my
We're
comment.
keeping it up for now. With Puka, if he didn't have the off-the-field problems, I mean, you could rank him so high on this list. It's not even
You
funny.
can take him first overall.
You absolutely could.
To.
It's just, of course, he's got to have some, and also Puka needs to stay consistently healthy throughout the course of the entire season. Like, we've really not seen him do that yet. He needs to do that, and he will, I think. And then Bijan and Gibbs. Look, Bijan's been going 101 in a lot of startups, and honestly, I don't know why he wouldn't. Bijan you're getting Christian McCaffrey when he's 24 years old. You can hold Bijan on your dynasty team as long as you want, as long as your league's going to last, and he's going to be good for you. He is maybe the best running back in the NFL. The other guy that's in that conversation, obviously, is Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs been a top 3 running back each of the last couple seasons, and nothing really changes with Montgomery being gone there, but he is somebody that is 24 years old. Same thing. He's Alvin Kamara when he was 24, right? And look what Alvin Kamara did in fantasy football for literally 10 straight years. And so all of these guys are in a tier above the rest of the field. These are the 7 premier assets in Dynasty fantasy football, and we drop down to the A tier. And these guys are obviously still elite. You start having more questions as you move down each tier in the Cornerstone rankings here.
Yeah, if you take one of those top guys in the S tier 101 in your startup draft, you are correct with any of those 7. That is how much the tier has expanded, whereas previously it's been like only 3 players. But with the A tier, you're looking at guys that fluctuate anywhere from like that mid-late first round range to the early second. Starting with Jefferson, and I'll throw in Neighbors here in this conversation as well. I think the Neighbors stuff with his rehab in the offseason has been a little bit overblown. I think it, again, people might continue to panic, and maybe the panic will continue to a point where he ends up being a buy as the season approaches. That's also a possibility. But look, with the knee rehab, a rough ACL injury, it at this point takes maybe longer to recover from an ACL tear than it does an Achilles. The way Jason Tatum has looked on the court, the way that George Kittle is trending to come back after tearing his Achilles in January.
I think it was also
him to be back
meniscus
week 1
for Neighbors, is what I've heard.
Yeah.
So,
I think it was rough. It was multiple stuffs.
Torn lateral meniscus as well, and maybe that's the part people are worried about. I don't know.
Yeah. All that to say, it's not going to result in us moving him down too much. It is going to result in us again not having him in that S tier with those other wide receivers. We do think that there is a notable gap between him and guys like Puka and Chase specifically. But look, at the end of the day, he's still like 23, 24 years old, and tied to Jackson Dart, which I have no issue with whatsoever. Malik Neighbors isn't even 23 yet. He's 22 years old. And Jackson Dart, obviously incredibly young as well. And you saw what he was able to do last season. He threw the ball quite a bit. He needs to work on his consistency, I think, as a thrower. But they do seem to not be too worried too much about the weapons that they have there. I think they would have maybe invested more heavily at the wide receiver position if they were truly, truly worried about the long-term effects of an injury that Neighbors suffered from last season. I think they expect him to come back and he's going to be fine this year. Justin Jefferson, expect him to bounce back from a production perspective. Again, this is the definition of a cornerstone. You see a guy that has a down year, they don't really lose that much value in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, you see short-term value dips, just the reality of contenders not valuing immediate production in the middle of the season, or lack of immediate production in the middle of the season. And, valuing guys like JT in the late second round of startups at that point in time. Like you're going to see that happen. Jefferson is going to be sold at 90% of the price that he should actually be sold at in the middle of the season when he's not producing. But in the grand scheme of things, again, you don't really see him lose that much value at all. He ends up being priced around where he's been priced for the last 4 4 years. And that's not going to change in our eyes anytime soon. I would expect him to take a big bounce back this year with Kyler Murray at the helm. Murray does have a shortcomings as a passer, like even as a pocket passer, he does sling it like crazy. He does love to throw the ball, and he does throw the ball more accurately than JJ McCarthy was capable of doing. So expect Jefferson to be solid this year. Jeremiah Love, we are going to give him his flowers and bring him up here into this A tier. I think we've seen him go as high as like the 108 in startups, right at the top of that A tier, right below those top 7 guys that go in most startups. And I think it's merited. He went 3rd overall in the NFL draft, incredible draft capital, one of the better prospects that we've seen in the last decade, up there with Genty and Bijan. When you're talking about prospect profiles, Saquon Barkley as well. Like, it's really, really exciting. You should be excited with Jeremiah Love going to the Arizona Cardinals, and he's probably going to be the focal point in that offense alongside guys like McBride and Marv, who hopefully can, command their own in the air there as well. Lamar and Daniels will be the 2 QBs below Allen and May. I'm going to be totally honest with either of these guys and what they're able to do this season. If both of them produce as top 3 quarterbacks, they will end up back in that S tier. They really will. And honestly, you can make an argument for both of them being in that S tier too. We just don't see them go in the top 7 as often as we see Allen and May go. In fact, we've seen Lamar and Daniels slide as far as the mid-second in some offseason startups as well. I don't think it's as merited for Lamar Jackson as it is for Jaden Daniels, because we have such an extensive sample size of Lamar Jackson producing at an elite level that I really think if you're going to make an argument for anybody to move up, it would be Lamar. But again, both of these guys very capable of it. Ashton Genty also going to be in this tier. I think he belongs neck and neck right there with Jeremiah Love. There is in our eyes 0 difference between the two of them. They're both in good situations for them to command a high level of volume and be productive as early as this year. You have Genty with Fernando and Clint Kubiak as the new head play caller there. And then Jeremiah Love, again, you would expect is going to run that offense. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be at the end of this tier. You could argue putting him the tier below, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think back in January earlier this year, I did a video of like the 8 best players to own in Dynasty, not necessarily buys, just like the best players that you want to own. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the most consistently elite productive wide receiver in Dynasty fantasy football by far that doesn't cost JSN, Chase, or Puka prices. Mm-hmm. Wide receiver 3, a top 3 wide receiver the last like 4 years. So he's the most consistent, the most reliable, and he stays on the field and he plays through injury.
Yeah, that's honestly the biggest thing for me. Going down to the beach here, we're going to start with Brock Bowers here. Brock Bowers is going to be in a tier in terms of tight ends of his own for us. And, we love production, and Trey McBride was as productive as it gets last year. And he's returning the same quarterback that force-fed him all of those targets last year. So I think short-term, you can look at Trey McBride as a very similar asset to Brock Bowers. The main thing that you need to point out here with Bowers is the situation did get so much better for him this offseason. Bowers also last year had, some pretty darn productive games. Like looking at this stretch after week 9, 49 points, 4 points, 17 points, 14 points, 24, 16, 11, 16. And who was playing quarterback for them? It was bad last year. The quarterback play was abysmal. The situation was abysmal. Bowers was injured last year. And the point will always stand that if you have a Bowers on a team that is a standard value or lower contending team, it is almost always a good idea to, instead of owning a tight end, own an elite running back or wide receiver so that you can kind of push some guys down in your flex spots and get the most productive old tight ends you can. From a roster construction standpoint, that still holds true. But when you're talking about including those elite and enhanced value dynasty teams that some of you guys have, when you have Brock Bowers on those teams, we are not telling you to move Brock Bowers on those teams. And we won't, because if you are going to have a tight end that is going to be valued in the top 5 rounds, you might as well have the best one. And Brock Bowers is the best tight end. He's probably the most talented tight end in the NFL right now. I think he is going to enter an age where Kittle is getting older and Kelsey's close to retiring, where he is the tight end in the NFL. I think from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, when you look at how he plays and what he's been able to do from a ceiling standpoint in his first couple years in the NFL, he does kind of stand alone. I do not think that the situation for McBride lasts forever, and I do think it has potential to get worse. Bowers has gone through the worst already. He's gone through the bad. And now he gets Fernando Mendoza there, and the other worst case scenario you have if Mendoza is not performing is Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins is going to be good for Brock Bowers this year. So short term, I like it, but even long term, pairing him with somebody who we have in the upside premier category as Fernando Mendoza as a quarterback, Bowers is set up very well long term, and so he is our tight end 1 right now. CeeDee Lamb and Drake London are going to be our wide receivers here. Lamb kind of has slid down from the A tier just a little bit because last year you saw Lamb on the field with George Pickens. And really what this is Pickens has risen up so far that we've had to drop Lamb maybe just a tier here. I mean, Lamb last year was the wide receiver 22 in 14 games, mind you, but from a touchdown standpoint, definitely not the Lamb that we remember. Pickens was taking a lot of those touchdowns last year, and I think that's worth noting. I think as long as Pickens is in Dallas, you'll see a little bit of a lower ceiling from CeeDee Lamb than you would have otherwise seen. Obviously, him as the wide receiver, the alpha wide receiver one there is a different story, but right now we have to put him in this tier. And London in this tier as well. Drake London, I mean, people tend to sleep on London more than I think any other, 24-year-old wide receiver with top 10 draft capital in the NFL. I mean, this guy was the wide receiver 5 in 2024. When you're looking at 2025, he played 12 games, but he was still a wide receiver 2 in that span. He was the wide receiver 19 overall in the season. Again, he missed 5-ish games last year. Last year, he still was scoring 16.8 points per game, which is 6th among wide receivers. And so London, I can't tell you that the situation has gotten much better there. It goes from Penix tearing his ACL for the 4th time to Tua Tagovailoa, but I do think Tua is going to be able to get the ball to Drake London enough for him to produce. And I think long-term, you are going to eventually see a situational increase there for London. So those are the 2 wide receivers in that tier. And then we've got 2 running backs here. Devon Achane, who has a ton of question marks because of the situation. What's it going to look like without McDaniel and Tua there? And you look at his splits in games with and without Tua, it's very ugly. And so can Devon Achane, who has primarily been a receiving back in his first couple of years, and a receiving back to the point of him having elite fantasy upside. He's the running back 5 each of the last 2 seasons. And he had 87 and 85 targets in those 2 seasons and 500 receiving yards in both of those seasons, and then combined 10 receiving touchdowns in the last 2 years. But that being said, last year he got it going on the ground more than he did any other year. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry and had 1,350 rushing yards on that efficiency on the Dolphins. We're basically betting that he's going to be situation proof. I still think he could be. I still think he will be. Malik Willis, obviously the wide receiver room is not great there. I think Devon Achane is going to be productive no matter what situation you put him in because I think he's an elite cornerstone asset. With Hampton, I think that the question is, does he stay healthy for a full season and put it together this year? And Nathan and I absolutely think that's going to happen. Because when you're looking at what he was able to do last year, in limited sample sizes, he had games of 24 points, 27 points, 20 points, 16 points, 14 points, 13 points. So, and he
a lot
played,
of those with limited snap share as well.
I was going to say, and he was, a lot of it was limited snap share. He had snap share games of 31%, 36%, 55%, 58%, all in the same games. So, yeah. Assuming that the Chargers get their head out of the rear end and give this guy all the carries he needs, which I think they will, because at the end of the year last year, by the time he gotten healthy again, in the Houston game, he had 20 points on 81% snap share. That's what you should see.
There we go.
He's ridiculous. He is absolutely ridiculously absurd. A guy who is 1 year removed from being drafted in the first round of the NFL draft and is an elite running back talent. And so Hampton, we absolutely love for this year. The question again is obviously he's young. Will he put a full season together? We're betting that he will.
All right, let's look at the C tier, the last one in the Cornerstones category here. Going to start with Trey McBride. Look, Trey McBride, I mean, you're talking in half tight end premium, 0.5 tight end premium formats. Dude was averaging 22 points per game. In full point tight end premium formats, 26 points per game. It's absolutely ridiculous. League-breaking upside is what you're seeing from McBride. Again, something that we have yet to see from Bowers to that extent, and we saw that, again, McBride in all of his glory last year. And an offense, I will add, that was consistently down, that had to throw the ball so much in the second half because they were down multiple touchdowns almost every single game. We'll see if that reigns true this year when Arizona is expected to have Jacoby Brissett, again, being the starting quarterback there now that they didn't get a guy like Ty Simpson, who a lot of people expected them to target in this year's draft cycle. Look, I think that the reason McBride is going to be in this tier, not with Bowers, is because, number one, you do have multiple years on Bowers or on McBride compared to what you have in Bowers, who's still super duper young. And also, you've got a lot of other weapons to consider there in that offense, whereas you just don't have that competition in the Raiders offense. And Bowers, again, very injury-riddled season last year. I think that was what was really holding him back from dang near the same amount of production level that you saw from McBride last year, is he just couldn't get it going because he was so banged up. This year, McBride now has Jeremiah Love to add to the equation with Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, who was the wide receiver 1 without Marvin Harrison in that offense. in like his 6-game stretch or whatever, which is absolutely ridiculous. Look, this is an offense that I think might look to spread the ball around with a new offensive play caller at Mike LaFleur, who's obviously has a history of being the offensive coordinator for the Rams over the last few years, ends up getting the head coaching job here. So that McVay coaching tree, you're going to see a McVay-style offense. We'll see what that ends up looking like for the production of McBride. Again, I don't think it's going to hurt him necessarily. I'm just trying to give you the rationale on why we have him a tier below Brock Bowers. Joe Burrow and Caleb Williams and Patrick Mahomes are going to close it out here. These are all guys that I think are deserving of going at the 2-3 turn. I'll be totally honest. Burrow has to stay healthy or he's going to move down to foundational. Mahomes is already almost there just because his high-level elite production is just not as consistent as we saw early on in his career. It's not because he's any less talented or any less good. It's just because the way they've operated their offense for the last 3 years has been less friendly for fantasy production on a weekly basis. You're going to see a lot of ups and downs. And he was running the ball a lot like crazy last year. That's why his high level production in the first half of the year was going on. And now I don't think that's going to be the reality this year because of him coming off that torn ACL. Caleb Williams, again, same thing here. Caleb Williams, we've seen go as high as the mid-first in some startups. I think that's a bit too high. Again, I don't want to dog on Caleb here, but this is one of those situations where it's like you saw what Jaden Daniels did after producing as a top 3 quarterback in his rookie season and how he fell as far as the mid-second. If Caleb doesn't take the steps that everybody's projecting him to take this year, he's going to fall back down to the 3rd. So just keep that in mind. Again, we have these quarterbacks at the end of the Cornerstone tier. They're still deserving of being Cornerstones, but I think all 3 of them have their own individual risks tied to them.
We're going to move down to foundational. Again, if you want to see all of these player categories, we have them listed for you over on a document on the site. We have Cornerstone, Foundational, Upside, Premier, Mainstay, Productive Vet, Short-Term League Winners, etc. So if you're not seeing a player that you would expect to see in one of these 3 tier lists, you can go to our little document here and see where we have these guys categorized. If you want access to that and also want access to our Rookie Draft Suite, which if you're a new member includes a Blueprint Premium and a Rookie Draft Blueprint for our Rookie Draft Suite sale this week. We're doing a Blueprint Premium for any new member. You're also going to get our Rookie Draft Analyzer tool. You're going to get everything we have on the site, the trade calculator, the rankings. You're going to be able to get in a domain league if you'd like to as well. You're going to get the full bakery database and you're going to be able to join the Discord community. So if you want to come join, get a free Blueprint Premium and get that Rookie Draft Blueprint, use code DOMAIN. It's the annual Mother Flog shirt code DOMAIN. I've got the link in the pinned comment. You can also get access to get all of these tools that we're talking about on the video. And we're going down to the foundational tier and we're starting with Tet McMillan by himself in the S tier because I think the only thing keeping Tet from the Cornerstone tier is him just doing what he did last year at a slightly higher level, one more year. Just one more year. That's really all we need to see. I think the other big question with Tet McMillan is Bryce Young. Like, I think that the Panthers, from a team standpoint, obviously got a lot better last year, right? They were performing at a lot higher level, and at the end of the year, they were playing better as a team. But I think everybody and their mom has questions about Tet McMillan and his ceiling in that offense with Bryce Young throwing him the football. Last year, Tet McMillan had 122 targets. He caught 70 of them. Okay, so a little bit lower there, but he is an ex-wide receiver, so you'd expect that. Had 7 touchdowns, which kind of helped his production. He was the wide receiver 16 in 17 games last year. He played the whole season, wide receiver 16. You really want to see that at a wide receiver 1 level for a Cornerstone. So that's really what we're trying to see with Tet McMillan, but I think he's the most talented and coveted of the young guys here in this foundational tier list. And so you put him kind of in a tier of his own. You're taking, Tet goes over all of these guys every single draft we've ever seen this offseason. But going down to the A tier, you're going to put Carnell Tate at the top of that. And look, Tate got top 5 draft capital, guys. And he goes and he's Cam Ward, Cam Ward is one of our upside premier quarterbacks. Cam Ward's wide receiver 1, fits well alongside Wan'Dale Robinson, brand new head coach, brand new offensive coordinator. And again, the draft capital and the pedigree, Carnell Tate easily could be a Cornerstone asset next year.
And a Dable offense as well.
There's not a lot that I'm not going to lie, I've been telling people this on live streams, but I am the draft capital situation combination for Carnell Tate has me pretty excited about him. Like, genuinely has me pretty excited about him. And so I think he's top of the A tier here. George Pickens, obviously in Dallas. Pickens was, kind of in, wide receiver purgatory on the Steelers. He's only 25 years old. He was the wide receiver 5 last year. His first year where he wasn't with the Steelers, he goes to Dak, and what happens? 137 targets. He has 9 touchdowns. He has 1,400 yards, and he's the wide receiver 5. And guess what? Right now, he's tagged. Understand that. I understand there's a chance he doesn't go back to Dallas. If he does go back to Dallas, he's returning to an offense where, again, Dak was throwing him the ball left and freaking right. even when CeeDee Lamb was on the field with him. And so you can't help but be high on a guy who, again, at that age, he is 2 years younger, a year and a half younger than CeeDee Lamb, is on an offense that is slinging the rock just like the Cowboys do, with Dak being able to support not only Pickens as a high-end fantasy football wide receiver, but also CeeDee Lamb. So you're not really worried about the competition there. You're just more focused from a long-term value perspective with George Pickens. You're hoping that he doesn't leave Dallas. Dallas is the best situation for him. So that's the big question mark with George Pickens, but he definitely, after being 25 years old and having a top 5 wide receiver season, deserves to be here. And then Jackson Dart. And you can, evaluate Jackson Dart on 2 separate planes here. Jackson Dart, the fantasy asset, and Jackson Dart, the real-life NFL QB. But you have to also acknowledge that Jackson Dart's performance as Jackson Dart, the real-life NFL QB, will impact what his shelf life is for Jackson Dart, the fantasy football asset. Jackson Dart, the fantasy football asset, last year in 14 games was the quarterback 14. Had 86 rushing attempts for 487 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. Sounds a little bit familiar because it's almost exactly the rushing production that Drake May had last year. And so you're looking at the same, from a statistical standpoint, the same rushing upside. Obviously, the big difference there, the 2 things. Number one, Dart played in less games, started less games. So it's, a little bit more rushing upside. Not near as much passing upside, and Nathan mentioned this earlier, lots of questions as a passer from a consistency standpoint, which again will impact his ability to stay on the field. But it certainly looks like the Giants organization is building around him with the weapons that they've put around him, in the offensive line they're building for him. I think they believe in him. So we like Jackson Dart from a fantasy football perspective. Again, when you're looking at his per game averages last year when he was on the field, obviously he wasn't on the field mostly because he just wasn't the starter at first. Averaged 17.6 points per game in the games that he was playing. And actually, it's a little bit higher than that. In the games where he actually started, I think it was closer to 19 or 20 points per game. And so he does have that elite fantasy football upside with the rushing upside there. We put him at the top of the A tier because he's, our favorite of all the quarterbacks in the foundational tier. But the B tier, you kind of open it up to all these wide receivers and running backs as we kind of move down our foundational list here. Yeah,
you got Tyson and Olave in the same offense here. I'm not necessarily worried long-term about what Tyson's production upside is going to be there alongside Olave. You obviously have seen in stretches Olave and Rashid Shaheed be very productive at the same time. You also saw pretty much immediately upon Tyler Shuck stepping onto that field as the starter, that offense took a significant step up, and he looked really, really solid. And that was with Olave and literally nobody else at the wide receiver position because they ended up trading Rashid Shaheed midseason to Seattle. Look, they needed more weapons offensively. They went and they signed Travis Etienne. They go and they draft Jordan Tyson, and I think they draft like 2 other wide receivers in day 3 of the NFL draft as well. They're trying to build up that depth chart. And it seems very clear at this point that they want to build around their quarterback in Tyler Shuck. I don't think they would have heavily invested in the weapons on the outside if they didn't feel good about, who's going to be commanding that offense long-term for them. I think Kellen Moore is very bought into Shuck and what he offers there. Kellen Moore also loves to throw the football almost to a fault. So Tyson and Olave, both of them I think are going to be very solid. Olave's got the proven production. I wouldn't expect that to be hindered whatsoever. And then I think your long-term upside is going to lie in Jordan Tyson, who will probably stay in this foundational tier, I'd say, for another year until he shows that he can produce at like an elite level alongside Olave, which could happen as early as this season. I would wager probably you'd see probably like a low-end wide receiver 2 season from Tyson this year and then really take that jump up the following season. It's just kind of a trend that we see with a lot of these offenses at the wide receiver position where it's starting to get more and more crowded. Just, again, solid steps up every single year. Garrett Wilson is going to be in here as well. Look, Wilson is the perfect foundational asset when you're talking about the definition. I mean, he's a guy that just gets the benefit of the doubt year after year after year, as he should. I mean, he was a wide receiver 1 last year in total points until he went down with the injury, and then he never came back. There was no reason for him to come back because they sucked so bad. This dude has maintained high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 production, despite some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL since he entered the league. He obviously had that 1 year with Rodgers, which was average quarterback play, but then he was playing with Devontae Adams as well, who produces a wide receiver 1 that year. Despite that, he was still like a wide receiver 1, which is pretty crazy. So Wilson, I'm not super worried about, and honestly, as much shade as Geno Smith gets for as poorly as he's played the last couple of years in Vegas, he does do one thing, and that's provide a lot of passing volume, and he can throw the ball better than Justin Fields can. That's a certified fact, and he will throw it a lot more than Justin Fields did. Because again, that wasn't Justin Fields' skill set. This is, again, not an offense that we expect to look amazing. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be sexy. One thing that we've just come to know and love about Wilson is he is so gosh dang consistent when you talk about his production floor, that he just stays here, and we just cross our fingers and hope that we're going to get a quarterback at some point in time. And he still is very young. Rashee Rice is in this foundational tier. I think the last time we did this video, he was on the low end of the cornerstones. Obviously, you've got like the legal stuff that went on, the alleged legal stuff, and him losing value again this offseason. And then you have, the talks about like, when's Mahomes going to be ready? Is Rashee Rice going to be replaced in the NFL draft? Are they going to really want to re-sign him? When you look at his efficiency metrics, like some of his shortcomings as a route runner and what he can really do in that offense kind of show a little bit of like areas for concern for what his actual upside could be from a production perspective. And I think that merits him being more firmly in this foundational tier. Honestly, he fell a little bit too far for our liking this offseason. And then once all that legal stuff kind of went away, he gained more value back up to, again, kind of settling close to where we have him ranked, which I think is around the third round in startups. I think that's very, very fair. We were obviously worried for his value that like a Jordan Tyson would end up going to Kansas City. They traded up, ended up being for Delane and not for a wide receiver. So that was kind of a surprise. Everybody assumed they would trade up for a skill position guy there, but that wasn't the reality. And at this point, it looks like Rashee Rice is the unquestioned wide receiver one in that offense again. I think it's kind of similar to Pickens, though. You're just hoping really the best situation for him to be in long-term is in Kansas City, and that's a little bit up in the air right now. James Cook is going to be at the tail end of this tier. I kind of want to highlight him and JT Hurts and Nico, who we're going to talk about later here, but James Cook is one of those guys, one of four guys I would put in the foundational category that are almost in their own little subcategory within the foundational category, and that is like your depreciating pillars, guys who, from a production perspective, produce such a high level that they're so much more valuable than any mainstay or productive vet that we're going to have ranked or labeled here, but to a point where they're going to be priced in the foundational range. Just know that when you invest in them, it's dang near impossible for them to gain any value relative to where they're currently being priced. They are almost guaranteed to lose value year over year because they're getting up there in age, or in like a Jalen Hurts type of situation, it's just a little iffy what his situation is going to be in Philadelphia long term. So James Cook, we absolutely love. He is, going to be 27 once the season starts, so he is getting up there. He was a little bit of an older prospect when he came into the league on a second contract, but again, really, really awesome production in the Bills offense where that system doesn't look to be changing anytime soon because Joe Brady, who was calling the plays prior, is now just the head coach. So I don't think you're going to see anything new there, which is great for Cook and his production for the foreseeable future.
Going down to the C tier, you got Jonathan Taylor, who we rank one tier below James Cook because I don't know. As a Colts fans, I'm not sure we can promise any type of situational consistency or safety there with Daniel Jones as your quarterback, Chris Ballard as your GM, Shane Steichen as your coach. Like, that's just also, not the most secure situation for Jonathan Taylor.
I mean, when was the last time that we saw him score 20-plus touchdowns? What did he do the following year?
The
year after that,
it was not good.
Severe, regression back to him.
Yes, he had a great year last year, obviously, and he has the elite scoring upside that you look for in a. If you're a contending team, enhanced elite value, of course you want to go get Jonathan Taylor. Like, it's an absolute no-brainer. He's going to be 28 this year. At some point, Jonathan Taylor is going to become a mainstay or a short-term league winner, even here in about 2-3 years. I think Jonathan Taylor this year, the next 2 years, has a pretty good outlook. But again, you do have to look at Jonathan Taylor getting towards now probably the final third of his career, and also looking at the situation and having some questions about what his long-term dynasty value installation is going to look like there. Couple quarterbacks, Bo Nix and Justin Herbert. Nix was a quarterback 7, actually, each of the last 2 years. Nix is already 26, going on 27 years old. And Justin Herbert is 28 years old already. Justin Herbert obviously has had multiple, really only one season in the NFL where he hasn't been a quarterback 1. The problem is he hasn't been a high-end quarterback 1 since his second year in 2021 where he was the quarterback 2. Since then, quarterback 11, 17, 12, and 10. But you can make the argument, and I totally understand this, Justin Herbert, even though he will be 29, is going into probably the most promising, from a fantasy perspective, the most promising situation that we've had for him since 2021. Mike McDaniel being the offensive coordinator there. I mean, we were in Greg Roman purgatory last year. And before then, we had Brandon Staley and his minions. Like, it's just not been the most ideal situation for Herbert. And I think now when you're looking at Omarion Hampton and Ladd McConkey and Oronde Gadsden, all of these weapons that he has around him, pairing that with Mike McDaniel being the offensive coordinator there, I think Herbert has a lot of production upside short term. And so again, ranking these guys in 2 to 3 year windows, I think Herbert could have a pretty good 2 to 3 years here. Kind of similar from a production standpoint to what we saw from Baker Mayfield for a 2 to 3 year window there, where he was a top 6 quarterback from a production standpoint. I think you could see that type of run from Herbert. And I think most people still draft and view him as a foundational piece. And then Colson Loveland. Loveland is probably the most unproven foundational piece we have. But you did see him at the end of last year really start to step up. In the last really like 6-7 games here, 16, 7, 14, 12, 7, 24, and 30 points. His target share started to go up. You don't have DJ Moore in that offense anymore. And everybody wants to talk about Luther and then Rome, and most people are talking about Luther, but we're still like, oh, Rome's not bad. Which, whatever, evidently is stupid. Let's say that a guy, Rome Odunze, who, whatever. I won't even go there. Loveland is the guy I think everybody kind of feels good about. And people want to point to, Rome is the reason Burden won't produce, or Burden's the reason Rome won't produce. Loveland could be the reason none of them produce at a high level.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's in this tier. Rome is not, and Burden is not. I think also tight end, being a foundational tight end is much different than being a foundational wide receiver. Yep. It's apples and oranges. But at the same time, Loveland, I think everybody has high expectations for him. I think you're going to see, a guy who was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft go absolutely bananas this year. That's what I'm hoping for with Loveland. So he sits here at the end of the C tier.
Then the D tier is going to start with Jalen Hurts and Nico. Again, I kind of brushed on Jalen Hurts a little bit, similar to Cook and JT and Nico Collins also in this tier, just guys that what their immediate production is going to be. For Jalen Hurts, I will say, he's been a top 8 quarterback the last 2 years. He has not been a high-end quarterback one with all the rushing upside that we like to put on his name and all the tush-push stuff. He has been so bad as a passer for the last 2 years that his rushing upside has had to raise his floor. We can't even talk about ceiling because there's very little passing upside at all, really, for him. That being said, A.J. Brown is probably on the move, and they just replace him with Mekhi Lemon. And I do think from an offensive perspective for Philly specifically, I think Mekhi Lemon fits that offense really, really well, and I think he could be really, really good for Jalen Hurts. I think that, again, the more talent you bring into that offensive situation, the more opportunity you give Jalen Hurts to just find a guy screaming wide open, because a lot of times it seems to be the only thing that he can do. I think sometimes there's just noise that comes out of Philly, because it just does, because that fan base is crazy. And the media around Philadelphia is just crazy. And they just want to push out whatever they want to push out. There's always news about, are they going to fire their head coach every single time they lose a game? And I'm not even a Nick Sirianni stan at all. I think he's kind of a tool. But at the end of the day, there's going to be constant noise all the time about every single player in that offense who isn't producing as a top 3 wide receiver running back at their position. It's just going to be the case every single year. There's so much noise there. It's kind of annoying. And while I don't necessarily buy that Jalen Hurts is going to be out of there after this year, I do think that he's not necessarily their long-term franchise option for the next 10 years. I do think that his shortcomings as a passer have really been amplified over the last year and a half. And that Super Bowl run, obviously, that they went on was not really any thanks to him. It was because of Saquon Barkley and that run game and how they're able to just take the lead within a quarter and a half of every single game and then just maintain that lead by running the crap out of the football for the rest of the game and just running out the clock. So that wasn't something they were able to do last year. Once their offensive line got injured, you saw them have to lean on Hurts and his passing more, and they couldn't get it done. They just couldn't get it done. And again, if you can't do that, if you can't be the guy that your offense can lean on, when they need you, that does kind of cap your ceiling and what you're able to do offensively. So some question marks with Hurts, but he still does belong in the foundational tier because he's one of the most consistently productive quarterbacks in fantasy football every single year when he is the starter. Nico Collins, again, alongside Cook and JT, while he's healthy, while he's on the field, he's a wide receiver 1. He is almost guaranteed to miss time every single year. His hamstrings are the hamstrings of a 60-year-old. It's just kind of a fact. I hope he can stay on the field. I like watching Nico Collins. I hate that he cooks the Colts twice a year. But you know, the Colts, that's not Nico's fault. The Colts could just not suck, and they do. So Nico, one of those guys that if you invest in him as a contender, I'm only okay with contenders really holding on to him because he is almost guaranteed to lose value year over year. He's not a spring chicken anymore. Brock Purdy and Trevor Lawrence, we kind of had some debate on what we wanted to do with these guys. And honestly, what it came down to is I don't think we can rationalize having Nix, Herbert, and Hurts in this foundational tier without talking about Purdy and Lawrence as well, because they're as consistently productive in equally as good offensive situations. And when you look at their long-term outlook, it's just as good, if not better, than some of the other guys that we have, some of the other quarterbacks that we have in this category. Brock Purdy, obviously, in a Shanahan offense. Christian McCaffrey is just free points anytime you dump the ball off to him. And then you have George Kittle coming back from the injury. You've got... who do they have a wide receiver now? Pearsall and Stribling. It doesn't matter who's there. I mean, you just saw Purdy was productive without any of those guys last year because they were all hurt except for like CMC. Purdy is so underrated. He is so good. He just has to stay healthy. And then Trevor Lawrence, I think, has to be more consistent as a passer, be more accurate. That's always been kind of a shortcoming of his coming into the league. He never has really taken that next step up. Though I think he's capable of doing that in a Liam Cohen offense. They have a ton of weapons there in the receiving game now. You've got the most recent riser on Parker Washington and what he was able to show last year. BTJ obviously took a step back last season, but could he come back and have a resurgence in his third year? Travis Hunter coming back from injury as well. I mean, they've built this offense, again, to be, you know, very pass-centric, moving on from Travis Etienne as well at the running back position. Like, they're going to have a running back committee probably with Bashal Tutin and Chris Rodriguez. They're going to have to lean on Trevor Lawrence and what he can do in the air. And I think that's going to merit more consistent fantasy production from him this season like you saw last year. And you got a nice little rushing floor from him, too. He's very capable of running the football.
All right, and then a quick look here at our upside premiere. It's here. I will put it on the screen. Ladd, Judkins, Henderson, Egbuka, Lemon, and Price are our S tier here. You've got Rome, Marv, Luther Burden, Mendoza, Warren, Bucky, Concepcion, Scadaboo, BTJ, Fan, and Kraft. And then Cooper and Sadiq are kind of the lowest of these guys. These are guys that we haven't quite given the foundational nod yet, but I think they all could get that this year. It's a matter
especially
of
the S tier guys,
who's going to move up and who's going to move down. And we basically have them ranked based on how likely we think they are to move up short term to the foundational tier. And so again, you can see all of our player categories if you'd like to over on the site. Again, all of our members have all the access to this. So if you're a member, go check it out. We've got it published for you. And, you know, I think categorizing players this way in Dynasty Fantasy Football has just allowed us to kind of sharpen up our roster construction, especially as we've gone on and building our own Dynasty teams. And let us know in the comments what you changed. This obviously is very subjective. Nathan and I, mostly Nathan, put these guys into categories. We obviously have our three factors that kind of influence our decisions as well analytically. But, you know, you could argue for some of these cornerstones to be foundational and vice versa, and upside premier to be foundationals and foundational to be upside premier. There's not a perfect science to it. It's mostly just our opinion and then trying to fit to our definitions that we created for the player categories. So we try to rank these guys best we can, but I think it is pretty in line with how the market's viewing these guys as well when you're looking at Dynasty startup drafts right now. So if you enjoyed the video, again, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed as well if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. We're trying to become the most subscribed to Dynasty Fantasy Football channel ever, and you can help us do it. We love you guys. We appreciate you. Again, check out the Rookie Draft Suite. We got the free Blueprint Premium and Rookie Draft Blueprint for you right now with the Rookie Draft Analyzer, the Baker, etc. If you haven't had your Rookie Draft yet, it's a great tool to take into it. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll see you soon.